In this presentation, we'll go over the solutions to the second set of practice problems since introducing the wedge in rule. Remember, we start with listing our numbers vertically like I have already done here. Let's look at the premises that I have. I've got two of them, P and T, arrow Q, assumption, T and P, assumption. Now let's look at our conclusion. What's the main operator? The main operator here is a wedge. So that's telling me I need to find the Q by itself, or M and N, and then wedge in the other one. While looking at my proof, what I have in the assumptions, I don't have either M or N anywhere. So it's telling me I'm looking for Q, and I'll wedge in the other part of the disjunction, the M and N. So where's my Q? Q's right there. It's bound up in this conditional statement here. Do I have the antecedent written exactly like that yet? No, I don't. So what I need to do, I need to break up the ampersand here in two. And from this, I can build my antecedent 1. I can put the P and T back together in the right order using ampersand N. And now I've got my conditional statement. I can kick out my consequent. And so from 1 and 5, I've got my Q. 1 and 2 is next to 1 and 5. So now I've got my Q, and I can just wedge in the other side of my disjunction. So from 6, wedge in. 6 has got 1 and 2 next to it. Don't need this. This 8. And clean this stuff up. This 8 here. So again, I was just looking for one of my sides and I wedged in the other one based on what my conclusion was. So that was the first problem of this problem set. How many premises do I have here in this one? I've got 3. So I've got P, arrow, Q, and T. It's an assumption. I've got Q, arrow, S. Another assumption. And I've got P by itself. Another assumption. Now I'm looking for S as my conclusion, and I see it's right here in my conditional statement. So I need this left side. Do I have it anywhere? Well, no. It's actually right here. So before I can even get to this Q, I need to break down this conditional statement. And the question should be, do I have its antecedent? And I do here in line 3. So I can toss this P here in this conditional statement, and I got to write the whole thing that's in red. So I need to write Q and T from 1 and 3, arrow out. We can't write just the Q by itself. We got to take the whole thing that's next to the arrow. So that's going to be from 1 and 3. Now, we're still looking for that Q, so we can break that Q apart from the T by writing Q. 4 ampersand out and 3. Now I can write the T using the same rule. I'm not going to need it, but it's alright to write it. And then, since I now have my antecedent to my conditional statement here, I can write my consequent here. So from 2 and 5, arrow out, 1, 2, and 3. That is the conclusion I was looking for. So with that, everything is done. So how many premises do I have here? I've got 3 again. I've got P. Got P, arrow, Q or T, Q or T, arrow S, P. They all get A's for assumptions. They all get the numbers listed next to them that they appear on. Now let's look at our conclusion. Our conclusion is the same thing as before. It's just an S, and it's bound up with this wedge statement. So I told you before, whenever we see a wedge statement in our antecedent, it's likely that we're going to have to build it. But let's look here. I already have this statement written exactly the way that I need it to be written. So I need to free it up from this conditional statement here. I can write it here in 4 by itself. Q or T. That's going to be from 1 and 3, arrow out, 1 and 3. And then clean this up a little bit. Now that I've got my antecedent, I can write my consequent here in line 5. 2 and 4, arrow out, 1, 2, and 3. Now, again, the reason why this one's a little bit shorter than the previous one, even though it's almost the exact same proof, is because we didn't have to build the antecedent. We had a wedge statement there, but we didn't need to build it because one of our consequents in the premise was the exact thing we needed for the antecedent and the conditional statement. So we didn't have to build it this time. So if you saw the wedge and said immediately, oh man, I got to build that. Well, in this case, we didn't need to. We already had this statement that we needed in the proof already. Here in number 4, we've got 3 premises, P or Q or T, arrow S, T, S arrow L, assumption, 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 1, 2, 3. So what's our conclusion? Our conclusion is a wedge, so that's telling us we're looking for L or M. As long as we can get one of them, we can wedge in the other. Well, we don't see M anywhere in our premises, so that means we're going to have to work to get L. Then we'll wedge in M. So L is stuck to this conditional statement that's bound up with S. We see that the S is all the way over here. So we need to work the S out of that conditional statement first. So that's our first starting point. We need to get this conditional statement broken down. Well, what's the antecedent in that conditional statement? It's P or Q or T. It's a wedge statement. The wedge is the main operator. Do I have either one of the disjuncts? Well, I do. I have the T by itself, so I can wedge in the P or Q to the T using wedge in. And then I've built my antecedent, and I can write my consequent here in line 5. So that's going to be from 1 and 4, arrow out, 1, 2. Now I've got my antecedent to this conditional statement, so I can get the L by itself in line 6 from 3 and 5, arrow out, 1, 2, 3. Now I've found my L, so I can just wedge in my M using my wedge in rule. 6, wedge in. 6 is 1, 2, and 3 next to it. So once we clean this up here, that is our proof. Here in proof 5, we've got two premises. We've got P arrow T or S, and we've got Q and P. Our conclusion is an ampersand. So we need to find Q, and we need to find T or S, and then we'll put them together to make Q and T or S. So let's look at our premises. Well, I've got a conditional statement here. Do I have its antecedent? Well, not right off the bat. So the only thing I can do is break up this ampersand in two. And look, I've got one of my conjuncts. And now I've got my antecedent to my conditional statement 1. So from that, I can write T or S from 1 and 4, arrow out, 1 and 2. So now I've got my other conjunct. I just need to put them together. I've got Q in 3, and I've got T or S in 5. So that's 3, 5, ampersand in. 3 and 5 have 1 and 2 next to them. So that is our proof for problem 5. Here on problem 6, I've got two premises. I've got P arrow Q arrow S, and I've got P and Q. Let's look at the conclusion. Conclusion is a wedge, so I'm looking for either P or Q or S, and then I'll wedge the other one in. Now remember, even though we see P and Q somewhere in the proof, we don't see P arrow Q anywhere. So we're not going to be able to get this worked out of our proof because it's not there. We can't just do P arrow Q by putting them together like an ampersand. We need to find the actual statement written P arrow Q, or we got to build it using our P arrow Q rule. You don't have that rule at your disposal yet, so you know you can't use it here. But just so you know, that's not going to be what we're looking for. We're looking for the S by itself, and we do have the S by itself right here. So we're working towards that. The main operator in that statement that includes the S is a conditional statement. So we need its left side. Well, that means the only thing we can do here in the first couple lines of our proof is break up the P and Q in line 2. That. And now I've got my antecedent for my conditional statement. Can write the whole consequent. Have to write the whole consequent down here. That's going to be from 1 and 3. Arrow out. 1 and 2. 1's next to 1. 2 is next to 3. So that gives us our arrow statement here. We're still looking for this S. And now we've got our Q here in 4. So we can toss the Q into 5 to get the conditional statement out. It's going to be 1 and 2. And just write S by itself. Now that I've got S by itself, which I was looking for here, I can just wedge in the other side. P arrow Q, wedge S. That's going to be from 6, wedge in. 6 got 1 and 2 next to it. So our proof is now done. This one's a little interesting, a little challenging compared to the other proofs that we've done. So we've got two premises here. Q T. It's an assumption. 1 S. It's an assumption. 2. What's our conclusion here? It's a ampersand. So it means I'm going to need to find this side and this side and then put them together. Well, what's the main operators in both one of those conjuncts? Well, they're both wedges, so I need to build the wedges and then put them together. So I'm looking for T or R, which means I'm looking for T or R first, and then I can build that. And then I'm looking for Q or R, which means I'm looking for Q or R first, and then I'm going to build it, and then I can build the whole conjunct. So you might see here in the first two premises, we don't have an R. So obviously we're going to look for the T to build this one. We're going to look for the Q to build that one. And both of them are bound up here in our first premise and our consequent. So we know that we're going to be working towards getting there. Now, help if I wrote the problem right. Like that, sorry. So now let's look at our antecedent. The antecedent is a wedge statement. Do I have either one of the disjuncts? Well, yes, I do. I've got the S by itself here. So I can wedge in my P using my wedge in rule. And now that gives me my antecedent for my conditional statement in 1. That's going to be 1 and 3. So the error out, 1 and 2. Now, as I mentioned over here when we were looking at our sort of roadmap for the proof, we were looking for T and Q by themselves. So let's go ahead and separate those using ampersand out on line 4. That. And so since I have each side of the or each disjunct for each conjunct, I should say, let's go ahead and build them. So the left conjunct, I needed T or R. So I'm going to add the R with the wedge. And I'm going to add the R with the Q. And then I just need to put them together using my ampersand N. So 7 and 8, ampersand N, 7 and 8. So this one was a little bit more complicated than previous ones. So remember, we were looking at our conclusion. Conclusion is an ampersand saying we need both of these sides. We need T or R, and we need Q or R. So we look at those statements, and those are wedge statements. So we need one of those sides to those wedges. We either need T or R for the left conjunct, and we also need Q or R for the right conjunct. So we look to find T and Q because there was no R in the whole proof. We built the different disjuncts. We built the T or R and the Q or R, and then after that, we put them together. So we got 3 premises here in the 8th problem. R, Q, arrow S, P, and R. So we're just looking for S by itself. We see S by itself right here. It's attached to this conditional statement. Do we see this condition, or do we see this antecedent anywhere? And actually we do. We see it right there. So we know that all we have to do is free up this conditional statement, and then we can get the antecedent that we need there, and then we can kick out the S for our proof. So to do this, we got to get rid of the P from the P and R. 3. We can also get the R by itself. We won't need it necessarily, but we could. Now, we've got our antecedent here, and we could toss it into the conditional statement 1 to get R or Q, and then we could, or we would write 1 and 4, arrow out, 1 and 4, 1 and 3 next to them, and then we could take our R and Q that we just got out, toss it into here, and write S by itself here in line 7, doing 2 and 6, arrow out, 2 and 3. So that is this proof, doing it this way. That's one way to do this proof, what we have right here. We could have done it a slightly different way. So let's erase what we've got here. Or at least up to line 5. Now, 3. Now let's look at our statement here. Well, what we were needing was just the S. So what we could have actually done is built this conditional using the R. We could have wrote R or Q, 5, wedge in, and then we would have tossed this into here. We would have got the S, and then that would have been 2 and 3. From 2 and 6, arrow out. And you can see we don't even use our first premise whatsoever. We didn't need it to prove it this way. But both proofs ultimately work. Both are equally valid. I just wanted to show you that there were two different ways to prove this one based on the information that we have. Here we've got two different premises. We've got P or Q, arrow T, 1, P or Q. So our second premise, let's look at our conclusion. Our conclusion is a wedge, so we know that we're looking for one or the other. We don't see P or S anywhere, but we do see the T by itself here. And it's bound up with this conditional statement. Do we have its antecedent? Luckily, we do here at the very beginning. We've got it in the second assumption. So we'll toss the antecedent into this conditional statement. We'll get the T by itself from 1 and 2, arrow out, 2. Now that we've got the T by itself, we can wedge in the E or S using our wedge in rule. So this one was super simple. And I wanted to do a simple one just so I could show you that even something that looked a little bit more complicated, as long as we use our rules the way that we've got them, it's actually a very easy proof to do. And even though we have the P somewhere in our proof, we couldn't have liberated it from the Q in the second line. We can't just remove the wedge. So looking at this, you might have thought, well, why don't I just remove the wedge and write P and then I'll wedge in the S. So that's not how we do wedge out. Wedge out is a very complicated rule. It's the last rule we'll do in this class, but don't think that from a wedge you can just take one of the sides. Instead, we had to work towards T and then wedge in the other part of the problem that or the other part of our conclusion. Now for problem 10, we've got two different premises here. P or Q or S, arrow R and T. Q by itself, 2. Looking for T and R, the ampersand. So we need to find T by itself, we need to find R by itself, and we can put them together using our ampersand in rule. we see that both of them are right here. They're just in the wrong order, so we'll ultimately just have to use arrow out and then rearrange. So, but first things first, those are bound up in this conditional statement here. So what's the main operator in the antecedent? Because that's the only way we're going to free up the R and T. Well, it's this wedge right here. So either I can make, or either I need P or Q or S by itself. I don't have S. I don't have P or Q, but I can make P or Q by wedging in the P to the Q and 2. And then from that, I can wedge in the S with the P or Q. Like that. Now I have my antecedent. So I can kick out my consequent. 1's my conditional statement, 4 is my antecedent. Removing the arrow, 1 and 2 are next to 1 and 4. Now I've got my R and T. They're just in the wrong order, so I need to break them down. And then, now that I have them broken down, I can rearrange them in the way that I need them based on my conclusion. Like that. And so there is the 10th problem, the final one of this set, to the proof introducing, or the proofs introducing the wedge-in rule.